I'm still alive, and today I wanted to talk about what may be the most underappreciated movie trilogy, Night at the Museum. My brother and I just binged all three of these movies, and they were just as good or better than I remembered. We had watched all these movies as kids, but with many of my childhood movies, it had been years since we'd seen them. So the first Night at the Museum came out in 2006, and it follows Larry Daly, a man trying to make an invention to get rich quick. But when his ex-wife says he'll lose visitation rights with his son Nicky if he doesn't get a secure job, he gets a job as a night guard at the Natural History Museum in New York. Or is it the Museum of Natural History? I should probably know this by now, but I don't. By the way, his son Nicky's stepfather is played by Paul Rudd, who finds himself in the exact same predicament in Ant-Man a few years later. Anyway, when Larry arrives at the museum, he meets the three old night guards and learns that he will be replacing all three of them due to museum budget cuts. The head night guard, Cecil, played by Dick Van Dyke, shows him around, and he's acting a little bit strange. He seems quite spry for an old man, but then again, that could just be because he's being played by Dick Van Dyke. He's pretty vague about Larry's duties, but hands him an instruction manual and tells him to follow it carefully. Then he and the other two guards leave. Larry almost immediately falls asleep and does not even look at the instruction manual. I wonder how he never was able to keep a secure job. He wakes up a bit later and notices that the huge T-Rex skeleton at the front is gone. Then he hears a sound from down the hall and finds that it has come to life. After evading the dinosaur, he runs around the museum and finds that literally everything has joined the dinosaur in coming to life. He is chased down by Huns, loses his instruction manual to a mischievous capuchin monkey, and is captured by an army of miniature cowboys. Owen Wilson, who plays the leader of the cowboys, Jedediah or Jed, tries to run Larry over with a mini train and goes ka-chow. Okay, I did just add that last part in, but he did hit Larry with the train. After that, Larry escapes and also has to evade Jed's rival, Octavius, the Roman general. He continues running until he is picked up and rescued by Teddy Roosevelt, played by Robin Williams. He's the only person so far who has made any effort at all to help Larry and shows him what is causing everything to come to life. It's called the Tablet of Akhmun-Ra in the Egypt exhibit. Every night at sunset, it causes everything in the museum to come to life. Akhmun-Ra himself is trapped inside a sarcophagus, unable to get out. Teddy tells Larry that he will help him restore order tonight, but will not do so again. And wow, Teddy is so immediately awesome. There were a ton of steps in the instruction manual that Larry got, but I think the only thing on it should have just been talk to Teddy. He taught him everything he needed to know about the more dangerous exhibits, and basically saved Larry's life. He also warns him why no one can get let out, because if any of the wax figures are outside after sunrise, they turn to dust. Robin Williams plays the mentor role so well, and while there's a lot of great characters in these movies, he's my favorite. Just before sunrise, Teddy rides back to his pedestal and assumes his still position. But as Larry peers towards him, this happens.
Bully! Got you, boy.
It's such a simple joke, but it's so Robin Williams and it just delights me. Anyway, I'll kind of speed through the middle part of this movie. Basically, Larry confronts the head night guard Cecil about everything coming to life, and Cecil tells him that he never would have believed him if he'd told him before he started. But Cecil tells Larry to study some history before his second night. After some consideration, Larry does decide to come back for the next night, and all the old guards retire. But just before they leave, one of them secretly makes a copy of Larry's key. The second night, Larry comes prepared. He practices magic to show the Huns, makes sure his keys won't be stolen by the capuchin monkey Dexter, and lets the miniatures out on the condition that they won't fight with each other. Some of this sort of backfires, but Larry manages to restore order on his own. But one of the Neanderthals manages to make its way out, and he turns to dust. Because of this, Larry is almost fired by the museum director Ricky Gervais, but through some sincerity, he manages to keep his job. Unfortunately, Larry's son Nicky was visiting and saw this happen. Larry explains that he wasn't actually fired, and to convince him, he invites Nicky to spend that next night at work with him. But that night, nothing happens after sunset. Larry looks around and he finds Cecil and the other night guards stealing the Tablet of Akhmun-Ra along with some of the more valuable items from the museum. Larry manages to activate the tablet and bring everyone to life, but the three old night guards still force him away. Though they are old, the tablet gives them new life each night, so they are still very strong. Larry and his son flee and enlist the help of everyone in the museum to stop the old night guards. He even frees the pharaoh Akhmun-Ra from his tomb, and instead of a rotting old mummy, he finds a very chill Rami Malek. The Huns stop one of the guards, some Civil War soldiers stop the other, but Cecil manages to escape in his van. Fearing they would never be able to track him, Larry frees Sacagawea from the display she's been trapped in for the whole movie. Which leads to my favorite joke of the whole thing.
He went east, but he lost control and crashed.
You're amazing. How can you tell that?
That was such a great subversion of expectations, and although she has a pretty small part in the trilogy, Sacagawea is great at giving a "I'm surrounded by idiots" face. So the reason Cecil crashed was because the miniatures Jed and Octavius managed to let the air out of his tires earlier. But Cecil grabbed the horse-drawn carriage from the museum to escape and runs over Teddy Roosevelt in the process. Fortunately, he's wax and insists that Larry go on while Sacagawea heals him. Incidentally, he's had a crush on Sacagawea for years, but has always been too scared to talk to her. Larry, using Teddy's horse, chases down Cecil and tells him to stop. Cecil replies that the horses drawing the carriage are trained never to stop unless they're told a secret code word, so Larry will never stop him. A couple of times in this movie, we've seen that Cecil really knows his stuff, and while he's far from terrifying, he still makes a pretty cool villain. But unfortunately for him, Larry took his advice to study up on history and knew the secret code word to stop the horses. So Larry reclaims the tablet. And I just want to say, this was such a cool way to defeat the villain. It was so refreshing that this didn't just end with a cliche fight between him and Cecil, and it was a really cool solution. With the help of the newly healed Teddy, Larry gets everyone back to the museum, but the place is trashed. He says goodbye to everyone, knowing that he will certainly be fired the next day. The museum director does just that, showing him all the crazy news reports that stemmed from the battle the previous night. There's footage of the Neanderthals waving fire on top of the museum, and there's some tracks from the huge skeleton named Rexy. Everyone believes it was a publicity stunt, but the director believes it was just Larry messing around. Larry accepts that he will be fired, but when he and the director walk out into the lobby, the place is packed. Larry was hired because the museum had budget cuts due to waning popularity, but now it's popular again. So the director gives Larry his job back. Then the movie ends with everyone celebrating the next night, and Larry's son Nicky riding Rexy, having forged a new bond with his father. Then the credits roll. To start with, Ben Stiller did a great job as the main character, and all the parts in this movie were super likable. This also was like an all-star cast of my favorite actors. It featured some of the people who played my favorite characters, like the genie from Aladdin, Bert from Mary Poppins, or Lightning McQueen from Cars. Not to mention Peter Pan from Hook, Alan from Jumanji, and Lovelace from Happy Feet. Robin Williams supremacy! Anyway, I've always loved movies that incorporate history. If you make a family action-adventure movie with history, I'll probably love it. It's what I love about National Treasure, and this movie has a similar vibe. This movie is so great, but I've heard basically nothing about it in the past few years. It's fantastic, and it's so much funnier than I remembered. It was successful at its time, but I think it should be more known today. It's like the perfect family movie. My brother and I watched the first one with our parents, and we all loved it. Our weird other brother didn't, but there's a reason he's not part of this channel. But after finishing the first movie, Nate and I both wanted more. So that night, just after I recorded my video about Dick Van Dyke, we watched the sequel. Wait a second, why didn't I just get Nate for this? We both watched these movies, might as well make it a reunion video. Hey Nate. Do you want to be in a video about Night at the Museum? Moving on, due to the success of the first movie, in 2009, Night at the Museum got a sequel, Night at the Museum, The Battle of the Smithsonian. And it was really good as well. So it starts with Larry doing a commercial for his new invention, the glow-in-the-dark flashlight. He started the last movie as an unsuccessful inventor, but this time around, some of them actually took off. He's now a businessman and the CEO of Daily Devices. We see him going through his office, talking to Ed Helms, who is pretty much playing the exact same character as Andy from The Office. Then Larry heads back to the Museum of Natural History to pay it a visit. But when he gets there, he sees that everything is being put in boxes for renovation. When the sun sets and everyone comes to life, Teddy tells him that the museum is being renovated with new digital exhibits, and all of the old ones are being headed to the Federal Archives in DC. Larry's old friends, especially Jedediah, resent him for abandoning them. They say that this wouldn't have happened if he had been around. Teddy tells Larry that they all just want to enjoy their last night, and not squander it in self-pity. And I think that's really good advice. Whenever we have a last day of something, we often spend it just feeling sad that it's over, and not remembering happily the good parts. So yeah, I think that's great advice, and doubly so for me because being delivered by Robin. But anyway, at the end of the night, as everyone is getting back in their boxes, Larry asks Teddy why he isn't getting in one, which is when Teddy confides in Larry that not all of the exhibits are being moved. Some of the more iconic ones, including him, Rexy, Achman-Ra, and his tablet, aren't moving. So for everyone except him, it was their last night alive. He didn't want to tell the others, because in his own words, it's sometimes better to tell a small lie than deliver a painful truth. Somewhat depressed, Larry goes home to his son Nicky. But the next day, he suddenly receives a strange call from Jedediah. The miniature cowboy tells Larry that the monkey Dexter had stolen the tablet, and Achman-Ra's brother Kamen-Ra is trying to get it. There are sounds of fighting around him, and he quickly has to hang up. Larry then makes the decision to get to Washington, D.C. to make it to the Smithsonian, Smithsonian, where the Federal Archives are. And I just want to say that I love how quickly he makes that decision. It's pretty much without a second thought, and it shows that while Larry may have left the museum, he still cares deeply about his friends. He arrives at the Air and Space Museum and learns from Mindy Kaling, while this is full of office cameos, that the Federal Archives are not open to the public. I mean, yeah, some crazy guy tried to steal the Declaration of Independence a few years prior. Why do you think it would be open? Yes, I know those are at different places. I want to make a national treasure joke, okay? So he walks around and sees this exhibit called the Gate of Common Ra that has a hole in it perfect for the golden tablet. As he's looking at it, the security guard Brundon, played by Jonah Hill, comes up to him. They argue for a little bit and he manages to swipe Brundon's security badge away from him. Larry breaks into the Federal Archives and eventually finds his friends. They're all frozen, given that it's still daytime, and are surrounded by Common Ra and his guards. They're all defending the large storage crate they're in from Common Ra, and Larry goes in and takes the tablet away from Dexter. Just as he does so, night falls, and Common Ra comes to life and shuts all of his friends inside the crate. Common Ra, continuing the trend of funny villains, is played by Hank Azaria. He's more villainous than Cecil, but he's also very silly, which provides a good balance. He takes the tablet, but Larry outfoxes him and his guards by freeing a giant octopus. The octopus starts fighting them, but it also follows Larry. But then he is saved by General Custer, played by Bill Hader on his motorbike. And that rescue goes great, right up until this happens. Larry keeps going and runs into Amelia Earhart, played by Amy Adams. These movies have a lot of famous actors in them. Amelia Earhart demands to go with Larry, and together they escape Common Ra's guards by trapping them in a painting. Given that he has lost some of his warriors, Common Ra recruits Napoleon, Al Capone, and Ivan the Terrible along with their respective men. Al Capone, played by John Bernthal, is genuinely intimidating, but the other two are kinda silly. Also, ever since we watched this movie a few days ago, I knew I recognized Ivan the Terrible's actor. And earlier today, I realized that it was Christopher Guest, aka Count Rugen from The Princess Bride. I told you, all my favorite actors in one place. But it ends up being Napoleon who finds Larry and Amelia Earhart first. He captures Larry and the tablet, bringing both back to Common Ra. And Common Ra then reveals his plan. He puts the tablet on the gate from earlier to summon an army of dead. He pushes some tiles on the tablet, then realizes that his parents have changed the combination on him. So he brings it to Larry and brings forth Jedediah. He puts Jed in a 1-hour sand timer and tells Larry that if he doesn't figure out the combination within that time, Jed will die. After many detours around Washington, D.C., a conversation with Abraham Lincoln at the Lincoln Memorial, and about 20 Einstein bobbleheads, Larry figures out the combination. The code turns out to be pi, 3.14159265, which, by the way, I have had memorized since I watched this movie like 10 years ago. Also, this is very random, but midway through that adventure, we cut back to Common Ra talking to Darth Vader and Oscar from Sesame Street. Okay, I guess. But anyway, after Larry gets the combination back from all the Einstein bobbleheads, we cut back to all of Larry's friends in the crate with General Custer. And then we get my favorite joke from this movie.
I will loudly announce that we are not going to attack. And then, wait for it. What's the amazing Custer about to say now? Oh, I hope he's my friend. BAM! We attack!
Man, Bill Hader stole like every scene he was in this movie. I like how he was clearly thinking that this was a genius move. Anyway, the third act of this movie sort of takes a while, so I'll go through it quickly. Common Ra gets the gate open, and out comes an army of bird-like soldiers. But then Abraham Lincoln from the Lincoln Memorial shows up and shoos away all the pigeons. They're terrified of him, and all the warriors slip back through the gate. Lincoln leaves, but before he does so, he tells Larry that a house divided against itself cannot stand. Then all of Larry's friends and Amelia Earhart arrive, and Custer executes his brilliant plan. They fight all of Common Ra's men, and Larry turns Napoleon, Capone, and Ivan the Terrible against each other, dividing the house. Then Larry brings everyone back home out of the Smithsonian. He speaks to the museum director and introduces a new nighttime entertainment program at the museum. Basically, everyone just goes around, and people just assume they're either actors or animatronics. And just like the last one, it ends with a nice fun party. So as far as sequels go, this one was great. I don't know if it was quite as good as the original, but it was still so much fun. That might be my personal bias though. It might have been better than the original, but we didn't get as much Teddy Roosevelt, which I cannot forgive. Also, slight nitpick, but I take issue with some of the posters for this movie. We can see that Jedediah and Octavius are the same height as everyone here, but they should be miniature. And again, in this one, Jed is the same height as Amelia and Larry. I mean, in fairness, he had a bigger part in this one, but he didn't physically get bigger. But I digress. So there were 3 Night at the Museum movies, or I guess maybe it would be Nights at the Museum. That kind of makes it sound like there are actually nights at the museum. Whatever, I know this video is probably already super long, but I didn't want to split it into multiple parts. So we're moving on to the final installment in the trilogy, Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb. Now I still remembered all of these movies pretty well, and going in, I knew the third one was going to be a hard watch. Not because it was bad, but because it was one of the last movies Robin Williams was in. Teddy was my favorite character in the trilogy, and Robin is my favorite actor of all time. I knew how this movie would end, and I didn't know if I would be able to watch it. But I knew that Robin Williams wouldn't have wanted people to stop watching his movies after his death, so Nate and I sat down to watch the third movie. So this movie begins in 1983 with the discovery of Akhman-Ra's tomb. We see a young boy on the mission with his dad falling into and discovering the tomb for the first time. Then we flash forward to the modern day where Larry is back at the museum. He's running a showcase, some kind of fancy event to promote the museum. But midway through, some corrosion on the tablet that makes everyone comes to life spreads, and everyone starts acting really weird. Rexy nearly kills some people, and Teddy Roosevelt just starts speaking gibberish. The weirdness eventually wears off, and Larry goes home to find his near-adult son Nicky throwing a party. He's DJing, and apparently that's his new dream. He says that he wants to take a gap year to DJ in Ibiza, which Larry is having a bit of a hard time coming to terms with. But he's still trying really hard to be supportive while putting Nicky on the right path. Now, one thing I really like about this movie is that while Nicky is older and still a teenager, he's still very much the same character. I mean, it's actually a different actor, but he still cares about all the people from the museum. And his dynamic with his dad is pretty much the same. After that, Larry attempts to figure out what's going on with the tablet. He looks it up at the library and finds a picture of the original discovery from that 1938 flashback. The librarian tells him that they would all be dead now, except for the kid in the photo. The kid then turns out to be Cecil, Dick Van Dyke from the first movie. Larry goes to see him, and the then 89-year-old Dick Van Dyke is just as energetic as ever. When he's introduced, he's dancing around, and how does he have so much energy? At the end of the first movie, Larry didn't turn in any of the night guards under the condition that they wouldn't try to steal again. So they're actually still on fine terms, which is nice to see. Cecil tells Larry that he might want to talk to Akhman-Ra's parents over at the British Museum. So Larry goes to the museum director's office to ask if Akhman-Ra's exhibit can visit the British Museum. Keep in mind, Ricky Gervais, the museum director, doesn't know that everything comes to life. He just thinks it's all special effects like everyone else. The director tells Larry that he was fired after what happened at the event. However, Larry manages to convince him to lie to the British Museum to let him in. So Larry goes and brings Nicky along. When they arrive, he learns that some of the other exhibits have joined Akhman-Ra, including Teddy, Sacagawea, Attila the Hun, Dexter the Monkey, Jed, and Octavius. Also a Neanderthal that looks like him and thinks Larry is his father. But anyway, they go through the British Museum as it comes to life for the first time. But then they alienate a Triceratops skeleton and have to run. But then they are saved by Sir Lancelot, so I guess there are knights at this museum. Lancelot then joins them on what he calls their quest. They fight their way past a dragon, and to be honest, a lot of this bit is just them exploring the British Museum. Still very cool, but it's not as good for a summary. Jed and Octavius get separated from the group pretty early on and get into all sorts of hijinks. Which leads to my favorite joke of this movie.
Pompeii.
I think it's so funny that with so many clues, it took Octavius, a literal Roman general, so long to figure out that they were in Pompeii. But anyway, as they go through the museum, the effects of the tablet's corrosion grow stronger. Teddy's arm turns to wax, and Sacagawea starts to freeze, and Akhman-Ra starts to turn back into a corpse. It's all pretty cool, but eventually they make it to Akhman-Ra's parents. They tell the group that the tablet simply needs moonlight since it was forged by the Egyptian god Khonsu. But right then, Larry is stopped by Lancelot, who takes the tablet and turns one of its tiles, rendering it ineffective. They show that a couple times throughout the trilogy. All the tiles in the tablet need to be facing the same way, otherwise it won't really have an effect. But once it brings everyone to life, they're alive for the full night. Lancelot, after learning about its powers, says that the tablet must be the Holy Grail he's been searching for all this time. Larry, Teddy, and the others chase after him, but after a little while, he manages to escape. By the way, we see a lot more of Teddy in this movie, which I really like. He's with Larry basically the whole movie. Lancelot sees a sign for a play called Camelot and bursts into a performance. He sees King Arthur being performed by Hugh Jackman and tells him that he has found the Grail. Hugh Jackman, playing himself in this movie, says he's just an actor and Camelot isn't real. Lancelot doesn't take that very well, so Hugh Jackman tries to calm him down, but at one point he just completely gives up and takes out his Wolverine claws. Except he doesn't have them, because he's just playing Hugh Jackman. Now, if he had tried becoming the Easter Bunny from Rise of the Guardians, I might have been on board. I'm spending way too much time on this. This was just a fun cameo. Anyway, Larry and the main group track Lancelot to this theater and chase him up to the roof. Lancelot, by the way, is unaffected by the tablet's corrosion because he's more powerful on his first night. But if it corrodes all the way, he will die along with the rest of them. This movie, it should be said, has a pretty robust logic system. But fortunately, Larry is eventually able to convince Lancelot to turn the middle piece, and everyone is saved as the tablet is repaired. Everyone heads back to the Smithsonian, and then Teddy breaks some news to Larry. They have collectively decided that Achmanron the tablet should stay here with his parents. It's the British Museum, of course they'll take it. But however, that means Teddy, Jed, Octavius, and all the others won't be able to come to life anymore. But there is still enough time for them all to fly back to New York and have their final moments at the Natural History Museum. So everyone makes it home, and Larry goes around and says goodbye to all of the characters. His farewell to Dexter the monkey was particularly emotional. But then he goes to the final person he has to say goodbye to. Teddy. He goes over to him and tells Teddy that he doesn't know what he's going to do tomorrow. Teddy tells him how exciting. Then he goes up onto his horse and assumes his still position. Larry leans inward, and Teddy yells and scares him once again, just like in the first movie. And then he says, "Smile, my boy. It's sunrise." It took everything I had not to cry to that scene in the movie when we watched it, and the same right now. I mean, in some ways, it's the perfect goodbye for Robin Williams, but it's still so sad knowing what would happen a few months later. I have a video about Robin where I share more of my thoughts on this, but for now, I'll move on. So I remembered the movie ending there, but it didn't. We flash forward to 3 years later, and the British Museum is visiting. Everyone in the museum has come to life once again, and this movie as well ends with a party. We don't see Larry inside, so as not to ruin all of his heartfelt goodbyes, but we see him watching from across the street. It helps to make that ending not seem so final, and we get to see Robin Williams riding around on his horse, happily smiling at his final scene. Then the credits rolled. The movie was of course dedicated to Robin Williams, as well as Mickey Rooney, one of the original night guards who passed away. Now, Nate and I watched all these movies in around 24 hours, and they were amazing. When we made that video ranking all of our favorite movies, I couldn't help but feel that we were forgetting something. And it was Night at the Museum. The first movie was amazing, and had not one, but 2 great sequels. It's very funny, had a good plot and great characters, and had a decent amount of heart to it as well. It's the perfect family action-adventure movie, and I wish it was talked about more often. For me, it's right up there with Cars and Jumanji, and it features the main actors from both of those movies. As always, whenever I cover movies, go watch them. Even if it's been a while like it was for us. Go remember what your childhood was like when Robin Williams was your greatest hero. Then come back to today and realize that he still is. I know this was a longer video. I'm on page 11 of my script right now, but I think it was worth it for this great trilogy. Thanks for watching, and Nate, I'll see you tomorrow.